Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're playing, well, we're not playing actually, reacting to every Insomniac Spider-Man character ranked weakest to strongest. In fact, this time it's actually the gaming Rifts tier list, not Crisis. You can watch that video too, but Crisis tier list I heavily disagree. Let's watch this.
Most powerful character in the Insomniac Spider-Man games, who is the weakest, and who sits nicely in the middle. Let's discuss that in today's video.
Strongest is Sandman, weakest probably Rafe or Fisk, and in medium I don't know. It can be kind of new, somewhat.
Starting things nicely off in the D tier, we have Rafe. She
Okay, I agree.
has pretty good martial arts training, is brave in the face of adversity, exceptionally acrobatic for her age, and is skilled with her kusarigama. However, she's clearly out of her league here. She is at best a slightly past her prime peak human, with no superhuman capabilities to speak of, with her only notable showings being taking down squads of regular goons, and going against a severely holding back Peter Parker, which
I agree. I mean, she's probably the weakest, or maybe around the same as
every character above her would be capable of replicating. Sorry, Yuri. Moving into the C tier, which I would consider the low superhuman tier. First off, we have Black Cat. She's a superhuman when it comes to her strength and agility, in addition to her suit amplifying her, potentially outclassing Spider-Man himself when it comes to who is more agile. She's a skilled fighter, and her razor-sharp claws make her dangerous up close. However, her EMP grenades would also be very effective at countering the equipment of other fighters present. However, Felicia is more of a schemer than an actual fighter, and likely survived as long as she did, due to her intelligence in favour of her combat prowess. She can certainly handle herself in a fight, but others would fare much better, I feel.
I heavily agree. Like, yes, I agree that she isn't really that strong. But like, I mean, she's not the worst. Come on. She's not the worst. So, I still say she could be probably lower, maybe not lower, but probably not that much higher on the list. I don't see her that strong. So, like, yeah, continue on.
Silver Sable is pretty much just Rafe, but better across the board, being
Great one is not weak. I don't explain. She's or she's probably the brighter scene. However, just enough. Yes, she's probably just not this well, still, she is pretty good. Maybe
an extraordinary martial artist and an accomplished gymnast, with Spider-Man ranking her among the best fighters he's ever come across, with her rigorous training allowing her to keep up with even superpowered opponents such as Spider-Man, in addition to her laser pistols, invisible technology at her disposal. Additionally, she's one of the most dangerous peak human fighters in the verse. However, sadly, she is still a peak human fighter and would struggle against characters higher up. Our first Sinister Six member, and indeed the weakest being Vulture. It took Peter many attempts in the past to defeat Tooms, and is one of the few characters he dreads going against, with his technology being further enhanced by Otto Octavius in the PS4 game. The wingsuit grants him enhanced strength and energized sharp projectiles, which Peter acknowledged as being lethal even for someone like him. Adrian's biggest enemy, however, is the passage of time, as at the ripe old age of 86 in the PS4 game, his age leads to low stamina which other younger fighters will exploit. Not to mention Peter has long since surpassed him, since he couldn't even take Peter in a 2v1 when he had broken bones. Toom's flight tech did give Kraven some difficulties in the PS5 game, however he swiftly met his end at the hands of the Russian, proving that he's nowhere near the top tiers of the verse. Prowler has superhuman physicals, and with the technology of his suit, allows him to easily dispatch Roxxon soldiers, who are already pretty advanced when it comes to their equipment, and gave Miles Morales a pretty good fight. He's not far behind in equipment either, as he can create holograms that will give him an edge in confusing opponents, in addition to the cloaking tech and weapons to get the drop on opponents. That being said, he does clearly have his limits, as a weaker, inexperienced Miles did beat him into submission and was likely holding back since they are family after all. As a result, I don't think he can be any higher. Taskmaster easily has the best weaponry here with his photo energy sword, in addition to his protective armor and being a master strategist and fighter. However, his greatest asset in this scenario would be his ability to mimic and counter the combat styles of other fighters, such as Silver Sable. He's supposed supposedly gone up against the Avengers. However, given that he consistently loses to even base Spider-Man, it's either exaggerated or he likely used prep time for that example. It's still impressive to mention though, I guess. Kingpin is easily the most dangerous peak human in the verse, and he might as well be superhuman, boasting incredible strength and agility for a guy of his size, to the extent that he can contend with Spider-Man, causing him great pain and able to ragdoll him through walls and ceilings. Additionally, Fisk is a master strategist and a deceptively adept fighter, making him a dangerous threat. His biggest asset though, in my opinion, is his durability, as he took a beating from Peter with relatively no injuries. In other words, I don't see any of the top tier fighters swapping hands with Fisk, even with their crazy arsenals. Tombstone would logically have the same weaknesses as Kingpin, however I ranked him above Fisk due to his confirmed superhuman attributes and freakish durability. Being completely bulletproof and no diffing attacks from Spider-Man, to the extent that he had to develop a counter drug to actually stand a chance at defeating Lincoln, whereas Peter could take Kingpin down with no prep required. Other than that, he boasts similar talents as Fisk, and is a respected, accomplished fighter, with superhuman traits thrown into the mix, especially since he holds a level of respect for Parker, and likely holds back as a result of this, making him, in my opinion, superior to Wilson Fisk, who would be going all out against him as, well, he really doesn't like Spider-Man. Tinkerer's programmable matter allows her to 3D print almost any weapon, limited only by her imagination, including shields, blades, and chains, with her shields being strong enough to negate attacks from an enhanced Rhino, in addition to being strong enough to consistently ragdoll Miles Morales, and in one instance, crack his bones and render him unconscious. In the final battle, she shows she is more than capable of keeping up with superhuman tier characters without issue. However, due to both characters sharing mutual respect and a friendship, it's pretty obvious they weren't trying to kill each other. Of all the Sinister Six members Peter has faced, he fears Electro the most and acknowledges that Max has the potential to kill him if he's off his game, with Peter stating that he would have met his end against Electro long ago had he not burnt himself out. Fast forward to the PS4 game, Electro now has a more developed harness given to him by Doc Ock, granting him a greater control of his powers, making him all the more deadly. Electro could even become an Avengers level threat if he were to reach his true potential. However, this was sadly not to be. In his current state, Electro certainly boasts a ridiculous amount of raw speed and power, so much so that Peter in the Raft breakout was writhing in agony from his lightning. However, his durability and competence are questionable, as Peter could contend with him at the raft, and even beat him later on in a 1v2 with broken bones, with Max proving to only be an annoyance to Kraven before being killed by the villain. Max certainly has the potential to be higher, however, due to his reliance on his abilities and incompetence against Spider-Man, he is sadly limited to the mid-tier. In Peter's first encounter against Shocker, they caused large damage to the 22-story Flatiron building, just with the collateral damage of their battle, and in the PS4 game, Shocker could effortlessly break free from Peter's webbing, and even stagger Peter with his attacks, made all the more impressive by Peter's new reinforced advance suit, before punching him through a bank vault door. Pete also hurt his hand striking Herman's helmet, and whilst Peter was holding back like always, this is the same guy who can contend with Kingpin, Rhino, and other Sinister Six members in strength. So it's pretty obvious characters lower on this list would struggle to even damage Shocker, let alone put him down. Made all the more impressive by the fact that Peter refers to Shocker as being unintelligent and not skilled by any means, demonstrating his insane raw power. Shocker gave Kraven perhaps the best fight out of any of the Sinister Six members, with the Russian even remarking that Herman wasn't fighting to win, but rather to survive, and even showed him a degree of respect, making him all the more desperate and dangerous in combat. That being said, he was still killed by Kraven, and has his limits against Spider-Man, so mid-tier seems perfect for him. Rhino, unsurprisingly, would be the most dangerous threat in this tier when it comes to powerhouse tier characters. In their first fight, multiple city blocks were destroyed, with Peter needing 2 weeks of rest to recover from the battle. Even in the PS4 game, he's still no slouch. Pete needs 2 hands to stop a punch from Rhino, and retrospectively considers the villain to be stronger than him, with Rhino presumably winning an off-screen fight against Scorpion, in addition to taking a beating from Miles Morales before going down. His suit makes him resistant to heat and electricity-based attacks, making him all the more dangerous against Electro, for example. Miles Morales in his solo game demonstrated he has the most raw power of any character in the B tier. He'd 1v1 Rhino and win, something that even Peter couldn't do at the height of his abilities, with Miles also taking on Roxxon Rhino and eventually taking him down. He also eventually beat Prowler and Tinkerer despite holding back against them. Despite his raw power and spider abilities though, Miles is still very inexperienced, and as a result, I don't think he can be ranked much higher than this. Scorpion was so strong that not only did he leave Pete various severe injuries in their previous battles, however Spider-Man had to reinforce his web formula multiple times just so that he could restrain Gargan for more than a few seconds. He was fast enough to catch both Miles and Peter by surprise, and would have killed a weakened Peter later in the PS4 game had Octavius requested to keep him alive. He even fought Rhino off-screen, although due to the enclosed space of the shipping container, he certainly would have lost that fight. Gargan's toxin is also lethal as a ranged projectile, but also when injected, as it can instantly neutralize Spider-Man and send him into an LSD-like hallucination, affecting Miles in a similar way. That being said, however, Gargan has been beaten by Spider-Man before, and was hilariously outmatched by Kraven. Raven, so he does have limitations. Mr. Negative's negative energy manifests itself in multiple ways, granting him improved strength durability in addition to forming weapons and constructs. His powers were highly effective at neutralizing Peter for a limited time, and he can even corrupt other fighters to, well, fight for him, I guess. His abilities also counter a lot of fighters on this list, as he was disrupting Miles' bioelectricity, in addition to being a counter to symbiote opponents. That being said, Lee is questionable in terms of the extent of his power. Due to his abilities feeding off his rage, he was likely at its strongest in the PS4 game. Yet Peter beat him twice in that story, with broken bones in the final encounter, in addition to a weakened, conflicted Miles beating a weaker Mr. Negative in the second game, so he's probably not all that powerful. Characters on this list might exceed in one category, however base Peter from the PS4 game is the complete package. He's strong enough to contend with Rhino, fast enough to keep up with Electro, has an arsenal of gadgets that could make even Taskmaster blush, and he has the brains to back it all up. Even when fatigued or with broken bones, or hell even at his physical peak, Peter was still contending with villains in this game that gave him issues in the past, including Shocko, Electro, Rhino, etc. I don't really need to explain his abilities, let's be honest. You all know how the web shooters and spider sense work. He is Spider-Man after all, he's like the most well-known superhero. That being said, he does have limitations. In a fight against 5 members of the Sinister Six, he got his ass handed to him and would have died if they weren't all holding back. Doc Ock casually bullied him at the end of the game, as if it wasn't anything, and was even stated to outclass him, with Hammerhead nearly killing him in the DLC. Had Black Cat not intervened. Anti-Ock Peter is exactly as the name entails. Base Peter in a suit of armor which greatly improves his strength and resistance, to the point that he could endure a battle with Doc Ock and eventually come out on top. That being said, the suit was heavily damaged in that fight, and I don't know how effective it would be at protecting Pete from symbiote tier characters. Still impressive though, and it should be the most powerful suit in the PS4 game canonically. Roxxon Rhino is basically just Rhino but better across the board. The main improvements being his borderline immunity to Miles' bioenergy. With the element of surprise, he knocked out both Miles and the Tinkerer at the church, with Miles needing to use his brains and agility to chip away at the armor to expose Alexei to his venom powers. I don't know what else to say, this guy is a complete powerhouse, with Miles having to resort to a similar manner that Peter would have fought base Rhino to take down the stronger Rhino. Doc Ock is described as the PS4 game's ultimate villain, and stated to easily outclass base Spider-Man in stats, which we get a taste of in the game. He effortlessly knocks out Martin Lee and a badly injured Peter Parker, with the latter having just beat Mr. Negative at the height of his powers. Otto in the final battle still nearly killed Peter in the anti-Ock suit, which is impressive given that Pete had a specialized suit of armor as previously mentioned, in addition to having knowledge of the neural interface, how it works, and how to deactivate it. essentially having Watto's weakness and prep time going into that fight. Yet Ox still overpowers Peter with one arm, and badly damages the web shooters and his mask, and nearly killed him when he impaled him. In other words, Otto would still likely be above Anti-Orc, as both were holding back and could have killed the other if they truly wanted to. Yet Peter had more advantages going into that fight than Otto did. Scream is the most difficult character for me to rank, because whilst yes, she should be significantly above the average symbiote and have all the traditional symbiote abilities, such as regeneration and the tendrils, her only major feat was going up against a severely fatigued, weakened Peter Parker, who was holding back against her more than he's ever done in his life, since it's MJ we're talking about and not some random criminal. And whilst yes, they were pretty comparable to one another, MJ was actively resisting the symbiote in addition to them needing sound waves to beat her. In other words, if MJ was actually using the power effectively, I do believe she would be comparable, if not above PS5 Spider-Man, but not by much. Base Spider-Man during the events of the PS5 game would logically scale above his PS4 counterpart due to more age and experience, in addition to the refinements in his equipment and suit. His new spider arms are implied to at least be on the same tier as Doc Ock's own arms, giving him a major power boost over his PS4 self. That being said, statistically he's more or less the same if we just take Peter himself. No, he wasn't nerfed, there's no in-universe proof or out-of-universe proof that he was nerfed, so please don't bring that up. So any wins and limitations he had in the past should still apply here. It's just that the arms would give him an advantage over the previous characters that he has fought in his life. If Doc Ock was the most powerful villain in the PS4 game, then Hammerhead is the strongest DLC villain. In base, he could already give Peter a good fight, be comparable to the likes of Kingpin and Tombstone. However, his new cyborg form is on another tier. He effortlessly overpowered a peak fitness Peter and Silver Sable in a 1v2, and he would have killed both had Black Cat not intervened. Described as being close to unstoppable, Peter and Sable had huge prep time against him in the rematch, in addition to engineering a military super weapon to exploit his weakness to heat, with Sable even having to kamikaze the jet into him as a last resort to ultimately put him down. Yeah, I don't see any of the PS4 characters taking Hammerhead in a 1v1, not in the cyborg form. Agent Venom didn't have much screen time. However, he still had notable showings. Despite having a fraction of the experience and skill of Peter, he still kept up with Spider-Man in their missions, and in a fit of rage even gave Kraven a good 1v1, and eventually knocked him out. Harry should logically have an insane healing factor in this form, and potentially have access to all the abilities Symbiote Peter has. Miles Morales in the PS5 game was superior to his debut game in every regard, and did have quite a few good showings, such as beating Martin Lee despite being conflicted and weakened, causing large damage to Sandman and holding his own against Black Suit Peter and Venom respectively. That being said, however, his abilities are highly effective against symbiotes and Sandman, so that's kind of to be expected. The fight between him and Pete was also circumstantial, with Miles having a ridiculous advantage compared to Peter in that fight, with him having a much shorter 1v1 segment against Venom than Peter did, in addition to Kraven not considering him a major threat in comparison to symbiote Spider-Man. In other words, his bio powers largely carry him this far, and he is a formidable opponent, however I can't rank him any higher. Kraven the Hunter is debatably the most dangerous fighter in the verse and one of the most skilled. However, it's his freakish raw power which carries him. He's killed multiple Sinister Six members with relative ease, bodied Scorpion on screen, easily killed base Spider-Man and was disappointed, with him also going against the symbiote-empowered version of Peter later on in the game, and also giving Venom a decent 1v1 fight. With prep time, Kraven is borderline unbeatable and a threat to pretty much anyone on this list. However, in a 1v1 in a random scenario, he does have limitations. Agent Venom eventually knocked him out, with Miles also doing the same when Kraven was immobilized, with the Russian meeting his death at the hands of Venom. He's still a powerhouse and would triumph over pretty much all the characters below him, it's just that when you take prep time out of the equation, he's obviously not at his peak. Lizard gave Black Suit Peter a much better fight than Kraven did, despite being a mindless monster and having no prep time, putting him above Kravinoff in my opinion. Connors is one hell of a beast, being capable of going blow for blow with symbiote Peter, but also having a freakish healing factor of his own, healing amputated limbs and appendages in seconds. Despite his large size, he could also blitz Peter, to the extent that his spider sense offered little advantage over the monster, with Peter having to abuse the symbiote's abilities to finally restrain him. That being said, Peter was holding back against him, so it's not like Lizard is above him by any means. Symbiote Spider-Man is a menace. Plain and simple, boasting all of the technology of his base advanced suit, in addition to massively amplified physicals and a potent healing factor. Whilst holding back, Peter in this suit beat and overpowered the Lizard, in addition to Kraven, although he did have to fully go all out to overwhelm the latter. Pete had a lot of handicaps going against Miles, yet he still did really well despite being conflicted, and Miles abusing two of his weaknesses. In another video, I proved that Symbiote Spider-Man would have beaten Miles if the situation had been different. I'd recommend checking that video out. Anti-Venom is literally just Symbiote Peter, but even stronger, none of the weaknesses, and having a few additional bells and whistles, such as being fully in control the entire time, with his new anti-venom powers offering him a lethal counter to symbiotes, as it's a combination of Miles and Mr. Negative's powers. Whilst he wasn't on Venom's strength level necessarily, he had much longer 1v1 sections against the villain, and had more success than Miles did. There's really not much I can say other than that. He's just unsurprisingly really good against symbiote characters. Venom is a force of nature as he overpowered base Peter casually and killed Kraven with relative ease. Later in the story, he overpowered and beat Anti-Venom and Miles in their 1v1 encounters, and could have killed both if he actually wanted them dead. If he reached his true potential, he would be a threat to the entire planet, with base Venom only really losing due to Miles and Peter working together to contend with him physically, Harry resisting the symbiote's influence, with Peter finally using Anti-Venom at multiple instances to finally purge the symbiote from Harry's system. Yeah, Tony Todd's Venom certainly didn't disappoint. Standing tall at the top of the list is Sandman. Flint Marco ragdolled base Peter and Miles at multiple points in that fight, throwing them across city blocks, with the Spider-Man abusing both his weaknesses to water and extreme heat to win. Unlike with Venom, Marco was dealing with both Spider-Men simultaneously throughout the entire fight, with him having surprising versatility for a skyscraper-sized sandcastle, including constructing duplicates for himself, constructions, generating city block-sized storms. Yeah, this was a no-brainer, he'd be at the top. The double S tier is reserved for 3 people: Stan Lee, J. Jonah Jameson, and people who liked and subscribed and commented what they thought of the video down below.